Welcome again to a new session on this podcast from arol.dev, in which we are interviewing many people around the industry or close to the industry, which is the case today, in which I'm going to ride the hype train that we have now about AI, in which for that I bring here actually the guy that knows more about AI that I know. So
Okay. Thanks for that.
So that's it. He's Jan. So before I can tell anything about him, Jan, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Jan. I'm from Barcelona. I've been in the field of AI, I think, for the last 6 years. And it was all very sudden. I'm an industrial engineer. Didn't plan to be on this, or at least after I did the big selectivity data exams, that wasn't what I initially picked. But I think there was a moment in my life that I realized how impactful technology was in like shaping our society, and the subset that I happened to pick was AI, and I basically switched my whole career. I learned how to code from scratch, so we can talk a little bit more about that. I created a boot camp. First, I created a nonprofit to teach people about AI, and I was actually like the first student because I was like, I also wanted to learn, so I created a group for people to do that. It's now a global community called Saturdays.AI. 35 different cities, more than 6,000 students, more than 250 projects that our alumni have launched. Some of them have gone to Cornell, Harvard, Stanford, have launched companies that have raised venture funding, are bootstrapping their own ventures. So I'm really, really proud of that. I did a for-profit venture side-off, which was accompany.ai, which was kind of like the same idea. Instead of like in the nonprofit 15 Saturdays, more like a boot camp where it was much more condensed and intense. I sold that to Strive School coming out of YC actually a couple of years ago now. I joined their team, and then I've kept working on the AI space, Motley Fool in the finance sector. We also did events in Barcelona called BCN.ai, where we had like researchers come down, break down complex topics, like explain to the regular humans like how it was what they did and why did it work and what was it interesting. And now I'm at Cornell. I got a scholarship from La Caixa, studying essentially machine learning, because you can like pick and choose what classes you want. And like I'm very much into LLMs, which I guess it's like the hype now for ChatGPT. But my life has fundamentally changed since December, and I'm gonna intern in SF in Create.ai, which is like a generative AI startup.
See, it's like, this is what I promised. It's like, I got a heck of a profile. And actually, what I like more about that is what you mentioned about this is not the industry that I picked initially. You know, so it's like you got stung by it at some point, and then it's like you got dragged into that, like there was like no other option. So it's like the thing that for me it's most interesting in a profile. Not because it's fine if you picked it. I picked myself in software engineering from the beginning.
You did the right choice.
But it's very nice how you react to that, and then you go for that. Which now you are actually forming yourself in an academic way, right? Which is very interesting, but we're going to talk about that later. That is motivation first education. Okay. So, but that's a concept that I want to talk about later. But you got stung by this AI world and everything. So you pursued that even though it was not your initial choice. When did you became interested by that? Because now we have like kind of a hype. We have a fast going on, so it's easy to get like dragged by that. But you did like long time ago. How you became interested in that?
I think it's like two phases, right? First one, I was like doing industrial engineering, and it's like how did I got stung by coding or programming, and then from programming, how did I pick this subset, right? So first of all, when I was doing industrial engineering, I think at some point I reasoned and I didn't understand why we were learning how to like cut, like how to like, what is the right protocol for cutting this shape of metal, and what the difference, like broca diamante, like this particular settings that from my understanding was like, we're going to use a code for it. So why don't I just learn how to code? Like here's the machine language. Why do I have to care so much of this, right? And also like there was another wave, which was like I was interested in startups, right? I was like, oh, there's these big companies, but actually I went to like Web Summit. I was like a volunteer in 2015, got to like investors launch, and I was like, wow, this is like really, really cool. I want to do a startup, right? And I think on that summer, I was like on my third year of the career. I was really thinking like what I should do and how can I build a startup. My grandfather was blind, and he had like passed away that year. And I was like, okay, I want to do something. It was almost like with that grief, I wanted to like create something for the blind people, because my grandfather was also like very stubborn. He was like 82. He was blind since he was 67, but he never learned like Braille. He got like, basically he had an extra person, which was my grandma, to like be his support. But I figured like there were several things that I had noticed. Like he couldn't explore like the different spaces in the city because he was like restricted for that. And I spoke to other blind people, and I knew that was like a problem that they had, right? So what I did was like, this is really cool. Let's build a startup. And the idea was like, let's obviously like zero knowledge of startups itself. I just like jumped for it and was like, I can talk about all the mistakes I did in the process. But I got like the smartest people that I knew that knew how to code, because there was obviously like a technical solution. And I said, why don't we like go to a hackathon and, build this idea, and I'll figure out, in which way I can be useful. And I went to that hackathon, and I remember like I saw them code, and I like learned a little bit of HTML, but basically like I served them coffee, right? I was like, I'm useless. Like I had this idea, like I know what needs to be built, and these guys are just like crunching at it. Like, they were to their credit. I was really good at picking the right people. So like, Sergio Casas is now work for Uber. His company got acquired. Is now he's like living in Toronto. We got another guy that went to MIT, but they were
serving coffees. Yeah,
exactly. They were phenomenal. It's normal. I was serving coffee, but I was also like, I don't want to serve coffee, right? Like I want to be that guy. I wanna be the one that can code the thing that no one else can code, and I want to be able to build something from scratch, right? And I thought about it. There was like a second wave where I was doing industrial engineering, and I realized like midpoint in the career, like half of the people that were doing industrial engineering with me had a family member that actually had the factory. Their job was guaranteed. But I had, I come from both my parents are professors. Like one, I don't have the resources to like, start an industrial venture, which like millions of dollars to just literally start a factory. And I also like saw the impact that technology had, right? I was like, well, there's nothing. And then you have code, and then you have something, you have an app, you have a product that you can sell. And the only thing that you need is like brain and ability to ship, and like you solve the bugs in time, right? So I saw that as like extremely powerful. And I think like for the next basically like year and a half, besides like kind of like finishing the degree, which is like the thing that I did for my parents, because industrial engineering, but I went to hackathons, right? Then I went to hackathons, and the idea was just like learn by osmosis, where like I'm gonna learn how to make this hacky thing, stitch it together, and then like more and more I was serving less coffees and doing more things, right? Like I kind of found my niche. And from that, I went to like, the second thing is like, how did I end up in AI? I did an internship at Accenture, which was like strategy consulting. I was just doing like pretty slides. So I learned how to like learn pretty slides and bullshit. I guess that's like how we could summarize it. But then after we won a hackathon, we had like Open Trends come and say, hey, like you should work with us, right? And I was like, Open Trends, I've never heard of them, right? Who's this? It's a consultancy, it's not one of the big four. And I remember I went to meet with Mark Noguet, which is now the VP of engineering at TravelPerk. And we had an interview when like he had looked at my whole profile. He was asking like very deep questions, and he was like really smart. They had a project that was like really spot on in terms of what was my skill set. And I was like, wow, like I don't know anything about this company, but I think I want to work with this person, right? And this still has been like my compass in life, like people, projects, like company name, branding. But I went to work with him. We were like doing consulting, but I was like, I want to learn how to code, right? Like I literally said, I want 1 hour of my 8 hours a day to be code, and I want you to support me on this. And they were like completely on board. But then, and this can be like another interesting story, Xavi Buscaya, there was basically two paths, right? I could either like be an Android developer, or which at that time was very well paid. It was a really good path, or be kind of like a data scientist, right?
Well, it still is, huh?
Yeah, I know. And I remember, so here's like a crazy thing that I didn't realize how crazy it was until like now I think about it. Because like Java 21 came out, Chavi was like, you should just do slides. I hope Chavi, like if he watches this, he forgives me for spoiling it out. It was like, you're really good at selling. You should just like focus on the strategy consultant side, like bring new business and so on. I was like, nah, like I want to learn how to code. He was like, okay. I mean, if you want to learn how to code, why don't you take the Java certification exam, right? I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, how hard can it be, right? I've done exams. I can take this exam. So I started studying for the Java certification exam with a bunch of Android developers that had coded in Java for like 1 year, 2 years that didn't have the Java certification, exactly, right? Yeah. And I was like just trying to learn from first principles, like, well, how does this work? How does a Java object work? I was like kind of like discovering how the Java language worked as I was using Eclipse for the first time, and then trying to answer the questions that like, I had to prepare for the test. Long story short, I studied like really, really hard over the winter, but I think I got like a 65 and you need to get like a 70. Like I didn't pass it, right? But I was actually really, really close, and not many people passed it. And then in retrospect, like some people tell me like, wow, it's crazy. Like you almost pulled off like basically a Java certification without knowing Java, right?
It's what you mentioned is not normal. It's like you work with people, and these people are great engineers that are shipping great products that they don't have this certification.
So that was really crazy.
Which is good. I defend it. Yeah. I defend it because knowing the fundamentals and how things actually work makes you like better at foundations.
Yeah. So that was a little bit disappointing, but I think like I still like had this like conversation with Mark, and I have to give him like a lot of credit, because I mean I ultimately take the step, but he was like also telling me like, listen, if you focus on data science, I think it was at that time was like not AI, just data science. Like you have a skill set, you've done like high level math in like industrial engineering that people from computer science haven't done. So like you really are going to have a leverage in this field. Whereas if you are like an Android developer, honestly, like iOS has been out for like, 10 years now. Like you can't outrun like an iOS developer, right? And I thought that was a really, really bright insight. And I was also like really passionate. Like data science was like a combination of things, right? Like you have to think, you have to code, and you have to like visualize or communicate kind of like the output of what has happened. And then from data science, my good call now in retrospect was like, okay, data science is really cool. I want to do like AI, right? I want to do this thing that's automatic. I want to do like neural networks. And at first I had no idea how to get started. Like 2016, 2017, 2018, there was like nothing. There was 4 people in Barcelona, and what was really lucky is like there was a couple of communities that were getting started, and I applied to like basically started in Barcelona. I said, hey, why not? Like it's really hard for me. I have 1 day free a week because like consulting is pretty intense. Saturdays. Why don't we start a community on Saturdays where people can learn how to code in AI? And we make it. I'm not a teacher. Like I cannot sell that I do AI, obviously, because I'm here to learn as well. So why don't we say it's just a community? Like we're not going to teach. We all learn from the best resources, and we ship something together, right? And that worked really well, right? It worked really well to the point that I have organized events all my life, like through Entrepreneurship Club. Like we brought Globo. We kind of like helped organize one of the editions of Hack UPC. We had done like a virtual reality fair, startup job fair at university. I had done like the job fair for a local university called Forum et Sape. And I had never seen the traction that this event had, right? Like we literally put the tickets on Eventbrite. 24 hours, it was sold out. We actually were charging money, like $80. Like next week I had like Telefonica calling in this building that we're on, and they were saying, we want to give you $3,000, like just use them, like put us as main sponsors. It was like really crazy, right? And I was like, wow, there's something going on here, right? Like, and also the people that were...
So the traction usually.
Yeah, no, and totally. So I think it's like credit of like the moment. There was a bunch of people that were also like weird like us, and we're trying to learn this. And we created this awesome community, I think, of people shipping things together, right? If I think of the first batch of like Saturdays.AI, we had like Irene, who went to Cornell, then went to Twitter to do ethics, now at Liberty, Nora, who went to work for Google. Like we just had a great density of talent of people that literally were like, this is perfect, fits my schedule. I want to learn in person. Like, this remote thing of doing a course, you're like at 2 a.m., you get stuck. You're like, okay, well, then now what, right? Maybe now you ask ChatGPT, but it's like, it wasn't that easy. And it was a really, really hard topic, right? So like the premise was, if you can't learn this in person with a group of people, you're not going to be able to learn it, right? So that's basically what got me started, like the bug, as we can say. Obviously, like seeing some inspirational videos like reinforcement learning from Google, like learning how to walk. I was like, this is just crazy, right? Like we're replicating things.
Yeah. So look, now as we're talking about this, because my next question, I have it noted down. I wrote, I'll play stupid. What is AI? But let's because I'm not going to play stupid. I actually I know a little bit what it is, but I think that everybody's talking too much about it, and not very like many people, really understand. So I think it's a great opportunity for you to tell us, so we really understand what is AI.
Okay. I'll try to explain it maybe like an onion, right? Where we can like peel different layers. But like the textbook definition of like, if we went to look at the dictionary, it's kind of like this branch or this area in computer science that is teaching machines how to think, learn, and act like humans, right? And that's like, okay, it's a definition, right? But can we do better, right? Like I think the concept that I try to think about, like, how is it different than just code, right? Like if we think about like practicality, like we can imagine AI maybe like as in like when we are cooking like a certain dessert, right? It's like a lemon pie, and we know the list. We have the set of the recipe, like if this then that, right? Like that's the code. Those are the clauses. You cannot, like, you want to do something else, you have to write a new clause. You have to accommodate for it, right? Like AI is kind of like you as a chef who is like an intelligent human being, and you see that you're doing a lemon pie and you ran out of lemons, and you're like, oh, I have oranges, like they're from the same family, I can put an orange, right? Like nobody's told you that. It doesn't say that in the recipe anywhere. There's no if clause, but you make a smart decision that kind of addresses that. And then we can go deeper. There's like machine learning, there's deep learning, there's transformers, which are a subset of deep learning. There's large language models, which are like a subset of transformers. So like, I don't know how deep on the rabbit hole you want to go.
I was more about fundamentally, like for example, we have been talking about AI for a long time. Not like regardless the hype, the current wave, GPT and everything. We have been talking about it a lot out of time for a long time. And at the beginning, AI was seen as, how do I program a computer in order to give you responses? So it was more the coding type of behavior. So we were trying to replicate a human. And that's something like very interesting that you were mentioning before. That is like how to think like a human. So I think that there was a breakthrough. And when you were talking about how like the demonstration of Google on how to learn how to walk, that was one of the first demonstrations in which we stopped trying to code a replica of a human, and we started living like going into the black box phenomena, in which is like, no, you take your own decisions and then you learn how to walk, and then later I cannot see why you decided to make that type of step.
Yeah, so I guess like progression, just to comment a little, like get people through that, right? Like the first thing that was done was 1957, right? So like 60 years ago, actually at Cornell, where I'm studying now, by Frank Rosenblatt, which was like the perceptron, right? And the idea was like, let's mirror the way humans think. Like let's fire up artificial neurons, right? Like when you think, that image that you are seeing or that sound that you're hearing like fires like a subset of neurons, and that neuron fires another neuron. Well, they were just trying to do like one simple thing, which is like perceptron. Let's do that, and then that basically enables some use cases, and it did work for some years, but it had clear problems, right? Like for example, once you have an XOR, you're doing, as a perceptron, you're basically creating like a linearly separable space. So like XOR is not linearly separable. So then you can't do that. And then people were like, okay, well, this can't solve that. So it must be wrong, right? So then there came like new things that solve that. Like you can have like a multi-layer perceptron, which is like more, again, trying to replicate the way we think, like several perceptrons chained together so that you, if you concatenator, you have several linear partitions. You can have like a nonlinear partition. You can also have SVG, like support vector machines, another subset of that given infinite time, they actually can perform like a deep learning network. But they were like kind of solutions. But we went into like the deep winter, right? Which was like from the 1970s until basically like 2012, things were not really moving forward. And credit goes to like Geoffrey Hinton, I think Jan LeCun, Joshua Bengio, like a couple of these guys that like kept pushing in this field when no one else was pushing. In particular, I think Jan LeCun was the inventor of the CNNs. Geoffrey Hinton was like, it's the godfather of AI, but also was the one that restarted the revolution in 2012 with AlexNet and like deep learning neural networks, which are like another layer. And there was also a very famous lab by a German scientist. Like the basically like the funny thing is like now new things are coming out. I will have to like, you have to quote me on the name because I don't necessarily have it available, but it's like should be there. Let me look into it. We can cut.
What is
it? It basically. The funny thing is that many of the things that are coming out now as like innovations, this guy did it in 1991, right? So every time anyone...
That happens in many industries, and
but,
in coding specifically.
But it's crazy because he had a lot of really good ideas like LSTM and so on. So like now is like his job's more or less trashing, but anytime someone says anything new, it's like, oh, we already did that in 1991. It's kind of like, it's interesting because obviously like it was done and people should like quote and reference it, but it's really interesting how we're like building up on like past things and so on, right? But then in 2012, I think everything changed, and I think two layers, right? Like one is because there was this new discovery of like convolutional neural networks like that were rediscovered, right? But the application of it was really powerful at detecting images, like ImageNet. They won the competition. Which was a competition that was traditionally solved by computer vision people. And these guys, they were not computer vision people. They were like, no, we're not going to separate faces and like bits and zeros, like dark layers and clear layers, like here's the nose. No, we're just going to feed this. And this is going to be a dog. This is going to be a car. And basically, like you said, the machine's going to think for itself. We're not going to say, oh, this is how humans do it. Just do it. And that's going to go through that, right? And that was also enabled by GPUs, which like NVIDIA is like what, $1 trillion based company at the time of this podcast. But basically somebody, I think it was Ian Goodfellow, understood or realized that this compute could be distributed for the cards that were created for basically like game processing. But the concept was fairly similar. You just want to process a mesh and you want to do it like at parallel time. So you can like feed a batch, then another batch, and then like this kind of thing like happens all together, and then it aggregates, sends it back to the CPU, and you got the output, right, in a much faster way. So those two things merged together, and then AI just went on like I wouldn't say like shopping spree, but like benchmark beating spree, right? Like suddenly it was good at natural language processing, it was good at computer vision, it was better than like state of the art, like people doing computer vision, people doing natural language processing, was just beating all of these benchmarks. Yeah. So that's more or less what kind of happened until now, which is Transformers, that is like even more crazy. But
this is the current scene, no? It's like these two battle scenes that are like the image processing and the text generation right now, for example.
So now the hype or like ChatGPT or whatever, it's like large language models, which is basically a subset of NLP, or like it's like a subset of transformers, which we can think about as like a really good recurrent neural network with like a submax layer on that like pays attention or decides what it pays attention to. And they're trained with a bunch of text, like trillions of parameters, like trillions of data, like Reddit, Twitter, like you name it, whatever they could scrape. And the really, really crazy thing is that once you cross a threshold, with like the whole premise of AI, or the whole reason AI died before, was that you had like machine learning and you fed it more and more data, and like things just like stalled out, right? And you had like 80% accuracy, you give it like more data, 81, but like it doesn't go to 98, right? And deep learning, it was really promising because many of the things kept improving the more data you fed it. But we could also say that there was a bottleneck for like compute, vanishing gradients, like overall size of the networks, like not bigger was not always better in terms of the network size. But with this particular subset of transformers and large language models, they realized that the more data you give it, the better it becomes, right? And there's like a magical moment where it crosses like 7 billion parameters, where it starts, I think parameters, but 7 billion parameters, which is a big number. But like it basically can generalize thinking, right? So like that's like the crazy thing where like you go on it and you're like, oh, what's the distance like from the Earth to the sun? It gives you that, but then it knows about chemistry. It's not like a really smart human, although if we rank it to like, you know, average IQ distribution, everyone, like it's pretty high up in some aspects, but it gets stuck with like silly things.
I heard in a podcast that now it's like it can be compared to 155 how do you call it, the
IQ test?
IQ, like 155 IQ, which is pretty like it was like 155 and Einstein was 165.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think so. The issue here is that
this is just like giving numbers to something that is like we're not comparing AI now to Einstein, but in fact, for comparing it to the population average, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, I guess the problem is that the way the IQ test is designed, this large language model is really good, let's say, at remembering facts. Like it will always beat a human. Maybe some other aspects not so good, right? But I think like it gets stuck on obvious things, and like now we notice it. But I think a good example could be like, okay, let's not go into the semantics whether it's like really smart or not so smart, but think about it like as a dumb human, right? Like it's a dumb human, but I can have 1,000 dumb humans do this, right? Like you want to do a task, which is like look at papers or look at data. Well, I can have 1,000 or 10,000 dumb humans like looking at this and scouting for, tell me every time that it appears a text dinosaur, and then tell me which type, right? And like humans would never do this, but like suddenly these LLMs can do this. And then that allows us to get into the realm of like a JSON or code, which we know perfectly how to process. So like, I think it unlocks a lot of value. And I think with GPT-4, right, it's really, really clear that many of us that have used it are like, wow, this has saved me time. This is something meaningful. This is something relevant.
The perfect assistant. But I think that comparison that, okay,
serious listening
in the podcast, so that's very interesting what you said, because it's like 1,000 dumb people, yes, which know like about their own specific things and that can work together really fast, like is this thing. As we were comparing to Einstein, it's very difficult, even though that all these people can come up with an EMC squared, for example. Is very, very difficult, no? And just because how you can put all these things together, you can remember everything. But I don't know, because right now it's this, but maybe tomorrow, not tomorrow, but in the next years, maybe that's going to be possible. But for now, this is what we have, no? And so I was going to go like farther in this, but let's understand, as you were talking about GPT. Let's understand what's GPT, just to demystify it a little bit. Like, because I find myself all like talking to people about general artificial intelligence, right? But first of all, like, what GPT? Like, because or Chat GPT, because well, they're actually not the same thing. But first of all, what's GPT?
Okay, that's a really deep question, right? So I'll try to break it down in 3 things. Like maybe what's like a transformer, like the transformer part of GPT. Like how does that work? What does it reference? What is like, how do you train that? Like what type of data, or what's the difference between training and inference? And then like, why do you say like general purpose, or what is the change from a transformer to a general purpose transformer, right? So in terms of transformer, it's a subset of deep learning where the network learns what it has to pay attention to, right? So I guess like one example is like if we put a sentence, right? Like in classic natural language processing, like you had sentences and you needed to know how things were related between themselves. Like how this thing, like this object is referencing like this class, but you had to like give it a way of like, you had to do like lemmatization, stemming, and like say, okay, this is a noun, this noun belongs to this, and it's all interlinked, and so on and so forth, right? With this mechanism, what it can do is like, you can basically figure out from the next word or from this word, when I look at this word, what should I pay attention to, right? And like sample sentences like, he was eating a meal and he really enjoyed it. Like it is it what? Like who, he, like the meal, right? So like if you were to zoom into the it would say, okay, I know it is related to like meal and he, because he's eating the meal. So that's really useful because you can figure out where like it has like a decision mechanism, right? Of like, this thing is complete. Like it's kind of like when you're reading a book, you can read a book really fast and there's like a sentence like, oh, I have to really pay attention to this. And sometimes like they go into like describing the scenery and you're like, just gonna skip forward, right? So it's kind of like that, where like from the text you're giving it, or like from the previous sentences or the previous tokens you're given, to predict the next or to create the next, what should it look into, right? And there's also a generative aspect of it that we're gonna delve into, which makes ChatGPT. But yeah, let me break it down into those phases. So the other one is like training versus inference. Like how do you train that? Like, how do you do inference on it? When you do inference, you're just saying like, I have this sentence, I want you to give me like the answer, like question answer, basically. That's one of the subsets. That's basically done thanks to another paper from Google, by the way. They both invented Transformer and BERT, and they're not necessarily using it. But what BERT does is the training mechanism is, I'm going to give you a sentence and I'm going to put some masks on some part of the sentence, and you have to tell me what is the right word, right? And at first it's really bad, but later it learns, like the overall like deep learning loop of gradient descent and like basically like the mechanisms that we invented through neural networks to figure out what is the optimal decision vector. And every time it makes a mistake, you do back propagation, you say this should be the right answer. But basically it learns that when you cover the word meal, like I wanted to eat something and I really enjoyed it. Like, what did you enjoy? I wanted to eat, eventually learns that the word that fits there is meal, and you do that for like a lot of purposes. And that's the way like you get to like a general purpose transformer is you basically have a bunch of data, right? So like you don't do this with like a subset of things or code, but you do it for a bunch of data. And actually something that we didn't mention is part of it is like the encoding, right? So like how do you pass data? How do you pass text, right? Basically into this transformer model. You have to encode it, you have to tokenize it. And what that means is like, you're gonna create like a partition. Is it gonna be like syllables? Like how are you gonna break down dates? Like the idea is that, if you think about two concepts, which are like king and queen, the model should know that king and queen are close to in the vector space that you're converting things based on the context or how it has seen king and queen appear on those sentences. Like they're mostly used together or like in similar ways, as opposed to king and kink. Like, well, kinky king in depends. That may be closer related, but like, as we're saying, like the distance, like, or the lemmatization distance or the distance of changing one bit shouldn't matter as much, right? So like you want to project things in a vector space where like, yeah, they're related and they preserve a relationship. So part of it is tokenizing it. Like the easier way could be like, or GPT-2. I think by the way, there's a really good talk by, I'm going to blank out, Tesla, Andrew Carpathy. He invented like a GPT-2 and I think most of GPT-3, and then was hired from OpenAI to go to work on Tesla. But basically, he has a video where he explains how a nano GPT works, and like that's really, really insightful if you want to delve into like coding and the logistics. But it's really, really great because he explains like the base case of like, if I didn't do anything else, I didn't do any tricks, how would this work, right? Like for example, one work would be like, I'm gonna encode every single word. Every single word is gonna be a token. So I just like, I map it. The token library is not that crazy. I just have like 27. If you're putting numbers, like maybe a bit more, right? But like, I'm gonna encode these things this way, and then I'm gonna fit into a transformer and do like the whole process. But obviously, it gets much more complicated for the token side.
Yeah,
that's one part. Like now, let's say we have a model that knows which things you should fill into gaps, like into sentences, fairly well, and it has a lot of data, so it's like pretty good, right, at doing this. And now, how do you get like ChatGPT? Is like the user asks a question, and you say, okay, this is the text that the user came up with. Give me the next word of it, right? Then it gives you the next word. And then you're like, okay, now give me the next word, like next word plus one.
Yeah.
Next word plus one. And then it comes up with like the answer. And then there are some clever wrappers of like, make your answer short or make sure you always end up with a point, like paragraph and so on. But if you've pressured ChatGPT, like sometimes it ends up like cutting off, right? As it's reached its token limit, like
Yeah.
it's available space for the answer. So I think that's like pretty cool to see. But also that's like what people are criticizing about this, which is like, oh, it's a stochastic parrot, right? Like it's just saying, give me the next word and then the next, but it's like doing this random, like, well, it's like stochastic basically means that if you ask the same question twice, you are not necessarily going to get the same answer. Like the same question doesn't get the same answer. And like, it's like, basically it's the because of the way transformer models are built and like the intrinsics of like this softmax / attention mechanism and the way this models do a generation. But basically it's like that risk where like, okay, well, like how do you know? Are you certain? You can't be. But also like I think there's like really cool things that have came out, like adding quotations or like sources to the document. Like I think that is true, and that one of the biggest defenders of this, like Jan LeCun, of like this is not AGI. These are not like things that can think for themselves. Like it's pretty stupid at doing some of the tasks, but for those that actually like use it, we know that it does provide a really clear value, right? Like it is actually useful.
One thing is the value, the other one is like the future, no?
Yeah.
And that's true. I've heard that there's like this fundamental limitation about AGI, no? Like that this is rarely going to be like or that it cannot be the way that we get to AGI because of the fundamental like nature of guessing the next word.
Yeah.
Yes. You can be like very good. It's the example that you were giving before. You can be really good at guessing the next word, but that doesn't mean that you're going to, kind of get creative.
Yeah. So like the thing that ends up happening here is that it closed itself into a loop. Like, like when it's giving an answer and it's like outputting code, right? And you ask like, give me the most efficient way to do this in React. And it like starts outputting and then uses like, you say React and Tailwind, right? And it starts using a library and it doesn't use Tailwind. Then if it hasn't used Tailwind first, it went through a path where there's no Tailwind. So like the code that's going to output later is not going to have Tailwind, right? Like it's just closes the answer and gives you that. And then like when you're like, oh, you're really stupid, or you treat it nice, like, please make sure you use Tailwind. And then it gets the previous code, has a context, and adds the Tailwind layer onto it, right? But like it's bad at planning. It's bad at doing like this long-term strategy of like, okay, I have to use React and Tailwind, so therefore like all my code should be restricted to this. And that's, yeah, basically.
That's why. Can we fundamentally ask that from guesser of the next word? I'm putting it very simple for how genius the technology is and how much value does it provide. But this question is here, no? So can we ask that from a fundamental guesser of the next word, like planning and that?
Yeah,
I suppose that the question is there. Cool. So I have seen like also like a lot of projects that sprout out because of GPT, not because they are using it, but because they are competing, and also this concern about we're giving all this data to OpenAI or to Google, which, by the way, I completely understand the concerns, because one thing is searching in Google like a lot of stuff. The other thing is the amount of information. Like, for example, myself, I never have given that much information to Google in searches as you are with OpenAI.
And even like private or confidential information, right? Some people use it for therapy, for medicine. Like,
I have to be very careful. Plus, also, the collection of questions that you do can make like a really good profile of yourself, right? So I was not like very active on this data protection for myself, but with OpenAI, I am. So then I started seeing like some other open source projects that they are like, if I'm correct, they are like offering you to run your own kind of GPT system, right?
Do you currently use them?
No, not really. But I think that this is a good opportunity for me to get educated about it and maybe like starting it, because I've been quite interested on having my own instance of that. So are these the LLM models, right?
Yeah. So when GPT-4 came out, first of all, I think everybody was like surprised because ChatGPT was going really well. But OpenAI was basically saying, this is really hard. We're not going to tell you how we did it, but it's impossible. You can't copy us, right? And that's like, I think I don't know if they meant it on purpose, but it's like an invitation for a bunch of
you cannot say that
developers to say, well, now I'm going to do it.
You cannot say that to the industry.
And actually, we're having a dinner tomorrow with someone in Barcelona that's like second author of, it's a paper that's figured out how to do infinite context. That's something that not even OpenAI has, right? So like, I think I give a lot of credit to open source, and it to me, honestly, it feels like this moment of, like in the 1990s, Bill Gates was saying that the internet should be closed, right? Like you're going to pay Microsoft a fee. And, they were perfectly happy, like splitting the bill. And they were saying like, kind of like the same things they're saying now. It's like, well, what about pornography, right? Like we need to keep an eye on that. What about like, people figuring out how to use like weapons? Like we need to make sure that, what about fraud? We need to make sure that all of these things are legit, right? And they have a point, right? Like I see that, but also like, who are you to restrict me in terms of how I should use this LLM? Kind of like, it's like, no, it's a tool. Why can't I use my own? And then also like, well, if I use your LLM, then I just give you like a bunch of data, right? Like companies like also like, leaking their entire code base, whatever. It's really whoever, if OpenAI manages to get like GPT-5 and it's like, impressive to the point that nobody can catch up, they're just going to have like that crazy mode that like no one else, like Google has this with search, right? Like you go to Bing and you're like, okay, thank you guys. But well, now maybe not, but yeah, basically, that's the scenario that a lot of people are not happy with, right? And I'm more like thinking, okay, I like open source, right? Like there was like the internet has been a really, really amazing technology, but when you think about who's making money from the internet, like, okay, Telefonica, whatever, all the like the media companies, but like the internet is from society, it's from the world. Like it's open, it's out there. There's a protocol. Somebody said,
everybody's making money.
So in a way, and that's just a projection of what I would like to happen, right? But what if, we could have these things open source? You can have like basically an open race, which is what we're having now, of who can do the best thing. And maybe it's not OpenAI. And to give them credit, they've done, like GPT-4 is really, really amazing. And I think like no one or very few have actually come close to GPT-4. But there's also there's two things that are really, really exciting that are happening right now with this race of LLMs, right? First one is, some of them are open source, right? Like GPT for All, Falcon, they're really big on Mosaic MP7, I think it's called. There's another, they're really big. They have a larger parameters. They're not GPT-4 level yet, but they're open source, like fully like used for commercial use, which is not the same as like Facebook Llama. But there's two things that are really exciting happening. First one is Facebook released the weights of Llama, and they didn't release. Technically, they got leaked. But I can also tell you that I went to a talk with Jan LeCun, and he was like, oh, we did an oopsie, right? So I don't know to which extent that they leaked it or they just like released it, but they share the weights of this model. So people start training on Llama, but this model has a research license, so it's not fully commercial. But some researchers on Stanford did something like really, really crazy, which was they trained alpaca, right? And alpaca is basically Llama, but Llama is not so good because it just has like 63 billion parameters. We don't know how many OpenAI has. And what they went is they went to GPT 3.5 and they were like, here's this answer. Like, this is the question. What is the answer that you would give me, right? And they just did this for like, I don't know how many millions of question answer pairs. Actually, like not that many. Like, that's also surprising, but like a decent amount. And then they were like on Llama, like, hey, this is the answer you give me. This is the answer you should give me. Like, so learn this, right? Like, it's kind of like this meme of this guy that is like has the books and is like trying to learn and just like throwing the book on himself. Like, the crazy thing is that the knowledge from GPT-4, GPT-3 is leaking. We can copy the knowledge without knowing the weights, without knowing anything. And that's also like something that scares a lot of people, which basically means like this transformer could, mutate itself into like a new model, a new version, right? Because like you don't know what you're passing on. Like we don't know what it is, but it's moving, right? That's really exciting and potentially scary. And then there's also another layer, which is like, OpenAI said, well, you can't train this because like, we spent billions or millions of dollars on compute. We have a partnership with Microsoft. Like it's just,
you cannot do that.
Either Google, but there's also like the guys from GPT for All, by the way, are really doing really amazing things like Nomic.ai. They built this on a weekend. Like that was the challenge and they've kept building ever since. But basically, there's a really crazy thing that's happening. Is like when we were using these models, the reason you couldn't basically, the compute was so expensive is part of it is like, well, you just need a bunch of weights, you need a bunch of parameters, you need really, really large GPUs to do that, right? Like not just one GPU or like the latest GPU in the market, but like a cluster of GPUs, and parallelizing that computer is expensive. But why is that, right? It's because it's a bunch of bits, right? It's a lot of bits, right? Every parameter is 16 or like I think 32 bits times like 16 billion, 63, 100 billion parameters. Like you make the math, right? But like people, I think now most of them, the standard is 16, right? But there's something really cool that came out, which is quantization, which is how can we do the same with 4 bits, right? Like how can, instead of giving you 16 bits, I give you 4. And 4 times like, I don't know if 63 billion, I don't want to say it, but I think quantization with 4 bits and 7 billion parameters like fits on a expensive but commercially available GPU, right? Like we're talking $50,000 instead of, millions and millions. And I don't know about the larger parameters. Mosaic ML has really good benchmarks on what it really costs to train if you're efficient with the compute and you make some of these tricks. But the really cool thing about quantization is that we're saying, okay, you got 16 bits of space to represent the float. Now I want you to think really hard how it can fit on 4. And it doesn't mean just reducing or chunking, but sometimes it means like creating an entire new architecture so that it fits on these 4 bits, right? But actually, like this means that not anybody, but it's actually pretty reasonable to train your own open source model.
Yeah, businesses can afford that.
Yeah.
Like individuals, not much,
there's a bunch of businesses that are doing.
Businesses can do that. Yeah, no, and that's the amazing part. One of the things, and maybe like I'm getting too philosophical before jumping into the philosophical questions. But that's for me, it resembles a lot like the times of internet. Well, you say that, no? And it's like, it's like some people are trying to make that a product, but it seems like, well, 2 things. One, I'm going to start with the less critical. First, the like internet, the value of internet is internet itself. So it's connecting things, and the more things they have, the more things internet has, the more valuable internet is, right? And it can be a really nice technology for the military and the academia, right? But until you don't open that to the population, doesn't become like really interesting, because what we have seen, I don't have to explain it. So it seems like we are on the same, and it's not coincidence that we have technologies available for free, like ChatGPT. Why is that? Because it needs to be trained, right? And we are training it. Now, it seems like the nature of the technology is to be open. Like it's the openness of the technology, the one that is going to make it valuable. So it seems like that's why it resembles like the appearance of internet, and it would invites to think that it's going to have like the same trip as internet. The problem in here is that the trained data, it's property of one company or it's property of several nodes.
Do you want me to put like devil's advocate, like OpenAI hat, or how do you want me to touch on this?
No, like go on. Okay. Whatever you want to. I love discussing hypothetics, so let's go.
Yeah, so obviously, like disclaimer, I don't work at OpenAI, but like if I put their hat on, right, it's like saying, well, this is really good, but it's also like really dangerous because, these models, you train it from a bunch of data from Reddit, 4chan, you name it. They're inherently like racists. They're inherently biased towards like certain aspects. So if you just use it right out of the gate, you can create a lot of harm in certain subsets of the population, or like languages, like countries, like coding, whatever they have a bias towards, they're gonna go to that, right? Like easiest example is like, imagine it's just like people are using it for career advice, and it says like, what should I do? I'm a man, 32 years old, blah, blah, blah. You give all these parameters, and it says, oh, you should learn how to code. And you do exactly the same thing. You just say you're a woman, and it says, oh, you should learn how to become a social worker, right? You're like, well, why, right? Like, and it's like you said, it's a black box. We don't know. Part of, it's been trained on a vast amount of data, and we don't have time to like fix it. And then what OpenAI does is like, oh no, don't take care of this. Like, we are gonna take care of this. Like, we're gonna make sure that they're like non-biased, that that they don't say like controversial political things, that they don't give out like the formula of how you can make a bomb from fertilizer and so on. So this doesn't introduce more harm to the society, right? And I think like everything, there's like different shades of that. I think like they're right, like, or it makes sense that to have like some sort of alignment filter on these models. But I also feel like, okay, why not work on an open source alignment filter that we all agree on, that we fit these models towards, right? It's very clearly a business play, right? And after all, they're a business. They've got investment of billions of dollars, and I think they very clearly understand, in my opinion, that if they are the first and everybody gives them data, they can build that moat, right? But interestingly, like, do they have a moat or not? There's like this Google leaked memo. We don't know if it's leaked or just purposely leaked, but it says like OpenAI has no moat. And there's like, one is like the compute. We've discussed why it's not like, not everybody, but like people, there's a good number of humans that can compute that. There's like ways of replicating this transformer architecture. Like you're at least open source, right? Like it's working like what, 5,000 guys or 2,000 guys. I don't know how many people work for OpenAI versus like 30,000 guys that are crazily obsessed about making this open source. Like open source can take it a really, really long way and fights for free, right? Doesn't get 300K salaries. Like people are merging PRs. They're doing like, honestly, like I've seen some like crazy improvements being shipped, over a matter of weeks, right? Like if you look at the timeline of, it took like Stanford 1 month to release alpaca, and then in 2 weeks there was a model that beat it. In 1 week there was Vicuna. Like, it's just like the pace is crazy.
Open source is the perfect continuous integration.
Yeah.
So
and if you ask me, projecting, what I would want is for this to be open source and there to like collaboratively agree on an alignment filter or alignment layer. ChatGPT or Sam Altman is going this world tour to like, go to every single government and say, like, speak to the users. There's a really famous clip of, I think, Sam Altman in Munich, where he says, okay, show of hands, how many of you would want for this to be open source? And like, there's no photo of the room, but like almost everybody raised their hands, right? And he's like, haha, we're not doing that, but that's good to know, right? And it's basically like I think, especially like if you're in technology, you're saying like, why should I trust you, right? I trust me or I trust the world. And honestly, it's like the whole premise of this being open source is like, well, if there's a problem, then we'll be able to fix it together, right? People will be able to put a PR request, merge, like figure out, like research, develop, and then this is going to be like a general purpose technology that is going to be available for all humanity, right? And I guess the problem you have there is that, well, you have like then competing interests. You have like, government of China wants to do this specifically for them, and they don't want like any references to Mao appearing, but they really want like for it to be good on Gaokao. So I don't know if it's gonna like exactly end up on that, or like there's going to be like an open source model to rule them all. I think another thesis, and honestly, like I'm saying this because if I've learned something through like this month, or I would say even in my whole life, is that, people that say like, oh, it's going to happen like this, right? Like, honestly, like you don't know, nobody knows, right? It's like, it's a probability vector. Like you're like doing like a Nostradamus projection. And I think my take is that it can go both ways, or, a different way that we never originally thought about. But as it stands now, I think there's two possibilities, or three, right? It's OpenAI and they handle everything. It's not billion, it's like trillion or whatever you name it, dollar company that just controls a portion of the world's wealth. And I think that's also like, people are like, oh, but Sam GPT has no equity. It's like, if you own like AGI or this thing that everybody uses, it doesn't matter. Like, you just can shape the way the world works, right?
Yeah.
The other one is like open source, same equivalent, but like the internet. And I think there's like another layer of like, you just have agents, and, Bloomberg works really hard in doing something that's good in finance, and they don't disclose their model. Chinese work really good in doing something that's Gaokao or English to Chinese translation. You then have
all these nodes.
Yeah, all these nodes, and then you have agents chatting with themselves in like a space where kind of like also like finally like the premise of crypto, right? Like automatic contracts, figure this out and do it on your own.
Which is actually very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting architecture.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean one model? It's like all these things that is like, actually it's like a brain, full of neurons that talk to each other. So it's what is interesting. Okay, so first I want to check, it's like everything is fine? Yes?
Cool.
Okay, we
First
got
time.
we got
Awesome.
the stability. Cool. So one thing that I can get from that, many things, but I have to pick like ChatGPT. I have to get like just one word, the next word, and that will be uncertainty. Nobody knows. Yeah, what's going to be the outcome of that in terms of the strategy on how this is going to work out. But talking about uncertainty and start talking about AI and its impact on society. Let's go to one of the like most common questions that are currently, that is like, what's going to happen to my job? Like, what is going to be the impact of all these models, not only LLMs, but AI in general, with this new wave on society, and if we are going to be replaced? What's your take on this?
I cannot give like probably to say, oh, it can go through ways. You want me to actually like commit to one area?
You can go free.
I think something that I'm certain, and it's really clear they are good at, is these general purpose transformers are going to increase our productivity, right? Our GDP. Like programmers are better programmers, doctors are better doctors, typists are better, writers are better writers, and so on and so forth, right? It is also going to highlight the manual work that many people do that cannot get replaced or automated. Like I'm thinking of artisans, like their crafts and things that for now robots cannot do. We're going to see if that is a for now or forever, right? But that is also another avenue. And I think at the same time, well, if everyone's productivity increases, right? Like let's say in general, everyone's 10% more productive, right? One, who captures that value? Like, is it companies? Is it like the LLM model on top? And two, like what happens, right? Like if we're 10%, everybody's 10% more productive, are we just like gonna have more jobs, or you're gonna fire a bunch of people and then more people, like eventually it's like a one-man company, right? I don't know. And I think part of the reason people are really scared and really afraid is because they see what could happen, right? Like if you're 10% more productive coding, maybe I don't need like 5,000 coders. I can just do, I mean, I think Twitter is like a perfect example of this, right? Like not necessarily that it had to do anything with ChatGPT. It was more like Elon Musk, but this guy came in, hate it or love it. Like he bought the company for an inflated price, but he's fired like, I don't know, like from 5,000 engineers to like 500. Like, you know, it's like, it's a really big number. I don't know, maybe there was 1,000, right? But it's like, it's basically saying I can do the same thing with this much less people, and it actually still works, right? And like then 4,000 people are looking for a job, right? And then you ripple that through every tech company, and then you have 50,000, 80,000 people looking for a job. And I don't know if the layoffs are more connected to like the overgrowth that happened on COVID, or the actual saying of, oh, well, there's ChatGPT now, these things are just gonna make us crazy productive, let's stay slim.
I think it's too soon.
Yeah.
It's
But
too soon for AI.
the thing is, well, like we know how our economic cycle works. So if everybody decides to do this at the same time, then you have a crisis. It's like a self-engineering crisis. Massive amounts of people are unemployed. What job do they do? Well, you know, if we're 50, 60, how do you retrain? That's like potentially really, really threatening, right? And I don't have an answer for that. I think nobody knows what's gonna happen, or that's my take. Like people that think like, for example, right? Let me give you a specific example. Geoffrey Hinton, which is this godfather of AI. One of the things that he applied AlexNet to was like X-rays, right? And he said, well, this is just like, this field is gonna go to zero. You know, like AIs are gonna do X-rays, and you know, there's not gonna be radiologists. We're literally like, this profession is gonna die, right? And he made this forecast. He's a really smart person. If you look into it, like this was like 7 years ago. If you look into it today, radiologists are booming, right? And the reason for it, like that's my hypothesis, is like doctors maybe are realizing, oh, now it's much easier, much cheaper, much better than to do x-rays. So let me just do an x-ray for everything, right? And you go to the US and you're like, whatever, let's do an x-ray, let's do an MRI. Like they don't even, I can tell you this from actual experience. Like I had this leg, I was like, oh, I had an injury here. Like these are, okay, let's do it. Like, I don't want to talk to you. Let's do an x-ray, let's do an MRI. Yeah, and then if you look at radiologists, there's a global increase in the need for radiologists around the whole world. There's a global increase in pay. And if you look at countries like India, they're actually like, in rural areas, maybe you have like one radiologist for every 20,000, 50,000 people. Like it's just crazy numbers, right? So like that didn't happen, right? Like, and the question is, oh, what about game theory? But like nobody knows, because like there's like two arguments of this, right? Like the first one is, this is an industrial revolution. It's happened before. And, when we had the invention of like factories, people thought, oh, what about the artisans? But the reality is, factories boomed, increased production, everyone's GDP increased, and the reality is that there were just less artisans, but they were better paid, right? Mm-hmm. And the same for horses and cars. And what the counter argument to that is, people are saying, well, now we are the horses, right? And I think that it's true, right? Like we are automating ourselves, like we are replacing ourselves. We have created something that has the potential of replacing our work and our productivity and what we do. Mm-hmm. And that's one, really scary, and also like I would say like exciting, but it's like just, well, we figured it out before, right? Like maybe not everybody has to work, right? Like maybe we have to figure out a way to like increase welfare systems, like universal basic income, and the best people get to work, or the people that are actually passionate about work.
Yeah, not best people. It's like the ones that are motivated to work.
That's an avenue, and I don't have an answer, but like I guess like what I would say is, if I had to like lay out, like if you were like the Spanish government, you're like, oh, what should we do? Like I think Europe, and I feel this really strongly, like comparing Europe to the US, but like Europe should stop trying to legislate for something that hasn't happened yet, right? Like now they're saying, for example, they're saying, oh, these models, if they make a mistake, like fine, or they're biased, the fine is up to 20 million.
You have to tax for every AI. I have heard that.
Yeah, and you are taxing open source. So you're making open source impossible in Europe. So open source is just going to go to the US, right? And then maybe like you just take money away from Europe, because there's Europeans, right, that are doing this. Like, I mean, Jan LeCun is European. George Hinton is a Brit that went to Canada. So like actually like it's just a bunch of people that could do something in here. You're preventing the next wave of that happening in your country, and that's just, you're not actually stopping it from happening, right? But like I think one solution or one way would be like to massively rethink how the welfare system works, and that's something that the US hasn't really figured out, and that's, I think, is going to be really interesting to see like this clash of like GDP, which is like, or the US, which is like law minimizer, right? Like there's always a state where you can do something, like gambling in Las Vegas, smoking weed first in California, and then if that works, it expands to the other states. Mm-hmm. And Europe, which is like law maximizing, right? Like the Germans want something, the French want something, the Italians want something, and the law is really restrictive to kind of like accommodate for all of that. That's gonna be really interesting. And also the clash of maximum capitalism, of like, let's just go up and see where this stops, of the US, like just print money, like no social net, whatever, and Europe, which is like more welfare maximizing.
No, it's actually going to be quite interesting how like two models that are like clashing right now, how are going to respond to this.
Or even China and India.
China, and the other being the US, with two different models. Let's see how it capitalism adapts to it from like also a centralized way of work like China reacts to this. I think it's going to be quite interesting. But yeah, similar belief I have, like that is like, actually people are quite surprised when I say these things. Like maybe not everybody has to work, and it's like, what do you mean? And it's like, I mean, yes, I mean, if we're going to be ultra productive, it's like that means that maybe not everybody has to work, and maybe like, well, I'm saying something stupid in here and maybe a topic, but maybe everybody has to find their sense, no?
Yeah.
One of the more like biggest problems we have is that as we have to work to eat and to work to
Yeah.
live, sometimes we are not like never discovering what we truly love.
Yeah.
Which means like I'm going to work towards that. Make it painting, make it like something artistic, or make it coding. Yes, well, which I love. Despite like, and I love even more now that GPT or Copilot is helping me.
Yeah.
I even like it more. So I want to like also I'm going to share something like personal, and then how
it.
if you also share
Sure.
it or not, because I don't know. That's the first time that I say it out loud. But I was researching about the concept of techno-anxiety, or yes, it's like it had a name. I'm not going to remember it now, but the concept of techno-anxiety. I was researching the other day. I was using GPT to to do that as well. It's like, and also feeling on how much society is advanced, not society, but technologies are advancing at that speed that you're not able to catch up. And I'm a person that really loves to catch up. And I'm a person that really likes to be like, I'm very comfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah.
I'm very comfortable with that. But still, with that much uncertainty, I'm seeing myself now being worried about not being able to catch up in all fronts that this is happening. My questions to you would be like, one, do you feel it? And second, because I'm sure that many people feel this right now, and it's like, well, I don't know. And second, how this is going? How do you think this is going to affect society as well?
Okay, that's very deep. I'm gonna try to like, I'm gonna go about techno-anxiety. I'm gonna share my own take. Maybe like techno-optimism. I think that's another angle, and then we can talk about like anxiety in general from the society, right? About techno-anxiety, I definitely feel it. I think like I'm 28 years old, and I got this scholarship to study how the field has updated, because it's updated really, really fast since I went and did a startup. And my take was just like, I've lost track. I fell out of this train, and now I really, really want to get on the train, right? Like, there is nothing in the world that I can think of that doesn't involve me being on that train. And that's also like, it can be harsh. Like, you know, people like sometimes message me and I'm like, yeah, this is irrelevant. Like, you know, you're a good friend. I care. I'm just like, this doesn't help me go towards here. And I really have to be here so that I can be in a position to help more people, right? Like, it's just like, it may just like, I think it can come across as selfish, but I think like that's my life purpose. Like, you know, I want to be on this train. I think that I have something to say, and I feel like I want to be able to drive this towards the direction that I think it deserves to be, like open source, like, you know, while still like not being negatively biased, like making sure that we get as many people as we can in this field. You know, it's not just like people from Stanford. That's not particularly why I chose to wear this T-shirt, but I mean, I think I'm still one of those white people that got a really crazy opportunity, right? But I think we have to make sure that we get more people on board. And if I'm not like, if I spend time like doing something else, I'm not gonna, you know, like there's this like, I don't know, the scene like the movies or like the guy that's like giving the hand on the train. Like I want to be there. I want to do that. Unless I'm on the train, I'm not. And the train like doesn't stop, right? It's like high-speed train, no stops. Like, you know, going around the world, kind of like this movie of like no survivors, bullet train. Like, what is that? You remember that train movie where they're just like the world is frozen, like polar. Snowpiercer, yeah. It's like it feels like Snowpiercer.
GPT,
exactly.
Nice memory. Yeah.
Snowpiercer. And like, I honestly feel old in tech, right? Like, I feel like I went to this hackathon. There was like there was this kids from MIT, Cornell, and UCLA, and they were 19, right? And I spoke with them, and I was like really curious, like, you know, how do you learn how to go? I was like, oh, you know, 2 years ago, COVID, I was in lockdown and started coding. And they were out coding me. And I'm not the world's best coder, but I like to think that I code at a decent level. I've won like some hackathons. Not only were they out coding me, but like, the way they were using like ChatGPT, like context windows from Copilot, I learned a lot from them, right? To the point, like, and I can tell you this is like a personal story. Top 5 biggest or most contributor of TypeScript said on Twitter, what these guys did in 4 hours is impossible, right? Like, you guys haven't done this, you're bullshitting. And we sent him the GitHub commits. We're like, hey, it's open source. Like, take a look. Like, we've actually done this. It was like, we went back and forth, we discussed a bit, and it was like, oh, you guys ship some features after, but it's like, no, like, I can tell you, I was there. We built this thing in 4 hours. Like, we basically, like, they looked into the API, they dumped the context, they were like, we're going super fast. I learned TypeScript that day, I was like, with ChatGPT, I was like, how do you do this? Like, JavaScript from TypeScript, do this module, import this.
I experienced it myself when I embraced like totally coding with AI, and not only one, but many at the same time. It's like you go fast.
And you get this thing, and it's kind of like, I feel like, I don't know if like a sugar rush, but like, you're like, if I'm not doing this, somebody else will, right? It's like the same game theory scenario of like, you don't have the luxury of saying, oh, like, let me take some holidays, let me do this. Like, either you do it or someone else will. Like, the world doesn't stop. They're gonna hire someone else. Like, you have to do it. So like, I think a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, also a lot of excitement, of like,
yeah, the positive one, the positive anxiety. But yeah, I have to say though that like, I shared like the pain that I feel sometimes, but I'm also want to share the relief that I'm telling myself. That I think that all these things are always cyclical. I felt it like they go in a circle. They are iterative. So actually, if you are like joining that train and you feel the rush to join that train, perfect. You're going to go like that round when it comes back. Yes, because it's coming back. You're going to have the thing synthesized. And the proof, you have it with this kid. Like you said, 17 years old?
Yeah, 19.
He didn't have like the time to catch that train before. Yeah. But then at that point in which he was prepared and he joined, things were synthesized enough and we reviewed them enough. So he could take full advantage of all of them. And him using TypeScript, it's just like, for example, a train that felt like very important by the time, but then we give it some time, and now the professionals that make it evolve, did some U-turns, make like some decisions, went that way until it's like in good state, it's synthesized, and now you can use it in the good way, So just calling, we can relax, we can stop. It's going to be there. We're going to still be needed.
Like, I actually disagree with this, right? And let me give you my take. I think this is a bigger moment than the internet, right?
Okay.
In terms of the change that this is going to create from society, I do think it's like a really, really crazy time of change. And of course, like, I'm a techno optimist. Like, technology, like the way we've gotten out of like bottlenecks or problems in society was never regulation in the past, right? Like, we never regulated our way out of something. We always like created better technology, right? Like, like the stem mills, like cotton, like the improvements, like to move on to like better fabrics manufacture. Then we have a problem because it's manufacturing in China, so you move it out, you do robotics. Like, it's technology, right? Like, it's what's gotten out of this hole. But and I can see how, like, for me it's really exciting because I'm the guy that is working with this technology, and for someone else that is not, that just gets shaped and impacted by it, it's really risky and really harmful, right? So I want to be sensitive to that. But
I see a different perspective, like, in that sense.
But when I think about it, like in terms of the internet, right? Like, I had a boss at Motley Fool. He caught the first wave of the internet, right? And this guy, like, 50 years old, he was retired. He just came back to work for fun. He was really knowledgeable because he had played with like, initial layers of assembly, of doing everything himself. He had been the first developer at Multifool, had made a bunch of money, was first developer at DoubleClick, sold to Google Ads. So you can figure out, he retired whenever he wanted. Yeah. And he was just like, it feels like there's a gap between those people, like the legends that are like, 50 or 60, and whoever's 40 now is completely outdated, blah, blah, until like 30, 20, and we figure it out, right? So like, what I'm trying to say is like the people that cut this crazy wave of the internet where they had to do all of, like, if you look at Elon Musk or all the guys that are like from the old crew of like PayPal, right? Like they're the $1 billion guys. And I'm not saying this for the money. It's like they shipped really meaningful thing from 1994 to 2002, right? Like the people that were in there on that train hasn't come until now, 2022, right? So like, yes, it's gonna come again, but you may be a long time waiting in the station. You're like, oh, when's my train coming? Like, no. Like, I'm not waiting. I want to be on this train. I want to make an impact. I don't know when it's going to come again. Maybe I'm 60. I'm 30. I'm going to be 30 now. I want to catch it.
Yeah, I understand. Like what I was saying about the different perspective is like, this is the passion. It's like you're passionate about it. You want to be part of the ones that are like ice breaking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
My call was a call for like a relief for that anxiety. Yeah, it's like we can stop. We can actually. It depends if you're creating it or if you're using it. And there's like a lot of people making money, for example, on the internet now. Yes, and they catch the train not being the first ones, but because it was in a later stage, and you could take full advantage at the moment you were ready. But I totally understand, like your point of view. I have to be part of that.
I want to be on the icebreaker train, right? Like
yes, and I'm not going to get into that because I know that our time is limited, and I want to go into a round of quick questions and answers. Okay, but I'm not going to get into that because maybe that opens the gate for the conversation on the who's training AIs and the responsibility that comes with that, and if it should be like open. I'm not going to ask that question, but fair. I think it's a very interesting topic that can be covered any other day. And if it should be like a company, like a set of companies, governments, population, I think that there's a very interesting topic out there. But I want to go into a round of.
Let's go.
I'm laughing because the first one is already quick question, quick answer.
Fine.
AIs are conscious.
The current ones that we have are not.
Okay. Are they going to be conscious? Or
I don't know.
What does it mean to be conscious? Anyway. I
don't know. The definition that we had previously is that it passes the Turing test. It's like if it's good enough, even if it has consciousness or not, which is like separate argument. If it's good enough to fool a human, then we should perhaps consider it. We've changed the goalposts on the Turing test because they're really good at fooling humans, right? Like I've used ChatGPT responses to like email my professors. I've gotten like people send me ChatGPT, and probably I don't know that they send me ChatGPT, but some people send me ChatGPT, and I was like, hey, like I want to speak with a human, don't make me waste my time. Don't send me like this. And I wasn't upset about the fact that they use ChatGPT, by the way. I was upset about the fact that, when I use ChatGPT, I take care of refining this so that it's like, condense it, make it more concise. Send me like this paragraph of like, four things in the way, right? Yeah. But that's my take. I don't know. Like, we'll see.
Yeah, that's not that's why I was laughing. It's like quick question, quick answer. Yeah. No, it's like we can stay hours for this. By the way, with this thing about professors and ChatGPT, I saw in Twitter the other day a story, a mail actually from a professor saying, okay, here you have your assessment on writing an essay about X. And whoever is going to send me, like all your assessments, essays are going to be passed through GPT. If GPT tells me that it's created by it, then you're going to get an F.
I think that's silly.
It's like, I found genius the most like response that was like asking GPT if the mail from the professor was
Was
created
written.
by ChatGPT,
Yeah.
and he's like, yeah, high likely this is created by GPT, and he's like, dude, it's like you cannot trust
Yeah.
GPT to tell you if this is created by it or not.
Yeah,
Like,
I doubt that he or she was able to uphold that, on the sense that if you pass the U.S. Constitution, it says that it's likely to have been created by ChatGPT,
Yeah,
and it's created.
Actually, I did the test myself, and
Yeah.
it's like I passed like some things that were written by me, and some others that were written by me with the help of
Yeah.
GPT, and said yes to all. It's highly probable that this is like, yeah, okay.
I'll try to go brief, but I think this opens up like a really nice discussion, right? Like when you use Grammarly and you correct your spelling, you don't disclose that you have used Grammarly. A lot of people are advocating for like, this message has been augmented by AI. But like the beauty of it is like that I don't want to disclose that it's been augmented by AI. Right? Like what I want to do is I want to send you a message and I want you to read at face value. And if it's useful, you're going to respond. And if not, you won't. But obviously it's problematic because then you can send mass emails. You can like really like, if you find a way to automate that, you could like basically send an email or a LinkedIn request to every person on earth. And I mean, that can get down pretty badly, right? But yeah.
What we have to become really good at, I found myself as like asking if now I have the power. I never had that power. I have the power now to write a lot of stuff. Yes, I have like I always had like a lot of ideas. Something that I was really bad about is putting this into words in order to like not words because I don't know how to write, but kind of structuring everything. So now I have this superpower. I can structure like a lot of things.
Yeah.
Now I'm finding myself like training myself to be concise and not let my text created with GPT and then refined by me to be as short as possible. Because that's another problem. It's like now with GPT, for example, one thing that we're going to have is a lot of information.
Yeah.
Yes, even more than we have now, and this is going to help us like synthesize it. So again, it's the art of the person in order to see it has to be more concise. It has to be shorter now, more to the point, less to the point. So that's something that is a skill that we have to train ourselves now.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite nice because we are focused not on the form, but in the content now.
I'm really, really interested about writing. Like I might like be a teaching assistant for a writing class later on Cornell, precisely because of what you said. It's called like, I think the value of what you communicate and how you communicate has significantly changed with the advent of ChatGPT. And I think for the good, because I think now or with time, it's no longer going to be okay to be just average, right? Like if I ask you, Arol, what do you think about this? And you just say good. That's stupid. Because I can ask this to ChatGPT, it's going to give me a better output, right? So like my expectation with you when I engage in like a human-to-human conversation is that you give me something that ChatGPT doesn't give me, right? Like you actually take the time to think.
That's Spark.
Yeah, you take the time to think and say, oh, this is what I really like, your condensed thoughts, right? Like, and it's like kind of like, I don't want the stochastic part of your brain, right? I don't want you to give me the first thing that comes to mind and for you to develop that sentence. I want you to process this. I want you to think through it. Like think strategically what you're going to say and what is the shortest amount of words that you can do. And like maybe, well, we shouldn't be doing a podcast. We should just make like a one minute video. But hopefully we're going to condense it like with some snippets. But it's basically that, right? Like people's attention, context window is shorter. How do you say the thing that really matters? And I think that's extremely important and something that ChatGPT is going to put to higher value, not less.
Yeah. Oh, super interesting. So I'm going to finish with one question that's not related to AI. Okay, so we can. That's a pity because I had like a lot of questions. Okay, but time is limited.
Should have thought better.
Something that is like more on my side. I'm very interested always, like hence being a founder of an academy. When you want to learn a new technical skill, what's your approach?
I think I've changed my approaches over the years, but if I had to summarize it like to one line.
Okay, you improved it?
Do it end to end, right? Like it's like, don't think about like, don't start doing like 50 tutorials of how to do this. Like just pick whatever process thing you think this can be useful for. Make sure you integrate it end to end and like a boilerplate, like independently if it works or not, like it pseudo works. And then from there, you've done it, right? And you can do another thing. You can then start asking questions, build more things on top of it. Like, I think the end-to-end component is really important to make sure like you first know how to make it work, like with like glue, kind of like it sort of works, and then you see the downstream implications, right? Like, what does it do? Why? Like, you implement something end to end like a really scrappy way, and then you can think about like, what does this do to my code? Like, does it make it better? Does it make it nicer? Does it make it faster? And if it doesn't add any of that value, like maybe you shouldn't be learning that technology, that stack, that thing, right? But if you can spot what it does and you want more, you're like, oh, this is really neat. Like TypeScript, right? Like I was scared of TypeScript for like a year and I hadn't done it. And then I did it on a weekend. I was like, oh, I'm gonna build a chatbot with LLMs, whatever, and it's gonna be with TypeScript. And then I started asking GPT-4 for it. And I'm not TypeScript expert, but I understand what TypeScript does and why is it useful and why I want more of it. Mm-hmm. So I want to keep learning.
A little bit of motivation first, no? Yeah. It's like it seems like you, like before we weren't able to apply something that we still haven't learned. That's why it's difficult to put it in practice. First, you have to study a lot and then put it in practice. Yeah. But now we have the opportunity to put things in practice in order to learn, because you are asking GPT how to do this thing, and then boom, like the solution comes, and then you can trust it, and then okay, so it's this way and that other way. That shared with a little bit of generic questions to GPT as well. Maybe it's like doing the entire process. Yeah,
no, and I to add to that, I would say that it has to be you, right? Like as in like you can ask like everybody uses Copilot or GPT-4, but it's like the same thing as if you just copy a bunch of code from Stack Overflow, you're not going to understand it. So like make sure you understand it and you start from the skeleton, like the essential subset of things that you need. So like then build on top of it. I think that's like also inherits or permeates really good coding practices for later on. And then I think like the combination of everything is that you want to make sure that what you're doing matters, right? And it's like that sounds like very cliche, but like fundamentally like really think through why you're doing what you're doing, and also like how do you strategize the rewards, right? Like we were saying this, I think I also this doing it end to end is like maybe to prove me that I'm not a dumb human. I can do this. Oh, I've done this before. It's like I think when I did a marathon or like a half Ironman, it's like you then have an anchor in your head of like, is this harder than a marathon? Because I've done a marathon, so I can do this. And the same thing happens with code, right? Is this harder than learning C? I can do this. It's not C or Rust or whatever. That's your like toxin of choice, right? But I think that's really important to also like treat ourselves like a little reward, like learning algorithm. Like we wanna keep our own motivation.
Yeah. Very cool stuff. It's a pity because we don't have much more time. But I will go like very philosophical, maybe for another day. But thank you very much, Jan, for all the insight. I think that I have like me and my team have like very difficult time now to put all these references of all these names and all these technologies and people.
I can send you the links.
In there. There's a lot to study, but it was very clarifying, and I thank you for that. I thank you for your time.
It's been awesome.
And I hope we can get more philosophical in another session.
Yeah, session 2.
So thank you very much, Jan.
Take care.
See you in another.
Thanks for everything.
Episode.
Cheers.